On September 14th, 2024, my younger brother stood in front of 200 guests at the Fairmont Hotel and introduced me to his boss. "This," he said with that smirk I've hated my entire life, "is the failure of our family." The room went silent. My mother's face turned red, my father looked at the floor, and Jonathan Pierce, Ethan's boss, looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then he smiled. "Interesting," he said slowly. "You have?" He didn't finish. But I knew. Somehow, he already knew my secret, and my brother had no idea what was coming. Let me rewind for just a second. My name is Madeline Carter. I'm 29 years old. I live in a 600 square foot apartment in Sacramento. I work part-time at a bookstore. I drive a 2011 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield, and according to my family, I'm a disappointment. My younger brother, Ethan, is 26. He works at Pierce Biotech in San Francisco. He drives a Tesla. He wears suits that cost more than my rent. And tonight, September 14th, 2024, he's celebrating his engagement to a woman named Chloe Blonde, polished, perfect. The party is at the Fairmont Hotel. Grand ballroom, chandeliers, white tablecloths, a string quartet in the corner, 200 guests, everyone who matters in Ethan's world. I'm wearing a dress I bought on clearance 3 years ago. My parents, Richard and Lauren Carter, barely looked at me when I arrived. My mother kissed my cheek without making eye contact. My father shook my hand like I was a stranger. I stood near the back, holding a glass of champagne I wasn't drinking, trying to be invisible. Then Ethan found me. "Maddie," he called out, grinning. He had that look, the one that meant trouble. He was walking toward me with a man in a charcoal suit. Tall, early 40s, sharp jawline, expensive watch. "Jonathan," Ethan said, still grinning. "I want you to meet my sister." Jonathan Pierce extended his hand. I shook it. "Madeline," I said quietly. Ethan's grin widened. He leaned in slightly, just enough for the nearby guests to hear. "This," he said, voice dripping with amusement, "is the failure of our family." The words hit like a slap. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Someone gasped. My mother's face flushed red. My father stared at the floor. I felt my throat tighten. My hands went cold. Ethan laughed. A few guests laughed nervously with him. But Jonathan didn't laugh. He studied me. His eyes narrowed slightly, like he was solving a puzzle. "Failure?" he repeated, voice calm. Ethan shrugged. "She dropped out of college, twice. Works at a bookstore, lives in Sacramento." He said Sacramento, like it was a punchline. My mother whispered something to my father. I caught the words, "How embarrassing." I wanted to disappear, but Jonathan kept staring at me. "Interesting," he said, slowly. Ethan frowned. "What's interesting?" Jonathan tilted his head. "You have?" He didn't finish the sentence. I blinked. "I have what?" He smiled faintly. "Nothing. Forgive me." But his eyes said otherwise. He knew something. Something I hadn't told anyone. My pulse spiked. Ethan, oblivious, clapped Jonathan on the shoulder. "Come on, I'll introduce you to my fiancé." They walked away. I stood there, frozen, as the party resumed around me. But Jonathan glanced back once, and in that glance, I saw recognition. He knew. Somehow, he knew. If you've ever been called a failure by someone who should have believed in you, stay with me. What happens next will blow your mind. Hit subscribe, you won't regret it. 3 days earlier, Austin, Texas, September 11th, 2024, 2:17 p.m. I was in my art studio, a garage I rent for $300 a month on the east side of the city. It's not really an art studio. It's where I work on things I can't explain to my family. Things like renewable energy prototypes, microcircuit designs, tech projects that sound insane when you say them out loud. I taught myself electrical engineering using YouTube videos and library books. I failed out of college because I couldn't afford tuition, not because I couldn't do the work. But my family doesn't know that. They think I'm wasting my life. On that Tuesday afternoon, I was soldering a circuit board when someone knocked on the garage door. I froze. No one knocks on my garage door. No one knows I'm here. I opened it slowly. No one was there. Just a manila envelope on the ground. I picked it up. No return address. No name. Inside were photographs, high-resolution images of a biotech lab, clean rooms, equipment I recognized, and in the center of one photo, a small device, about the size of a USB drive, glowing faintly blue. It was my prototype. The renewable energy chip I'd been developing for 2 years, the one I kept locked in a drawer in my apartment, the one no one was supposed to know about. My hands shook. Beneath the photos was a contract, official letterhead, Pierce Biotech, and at the bottom, a signature, Jonathan Pierce. My name was written across the top in red ink, but I didn't sign this. I didn't submit anything to Pierce Biotech. I flipped through the pages, technical specs, energy output projections, market analysis. This was my work, but someone else had submitted it, someone who had access to my apartment, someone who knew exactly what I was working on. My stomach dropped. Ethan. My brother had been to my apartment twice in the past month. Both times, I'd left him alone for a few minutes while I ran to the store. He must have copied my files. He must have stolen my prototype, and now he was pitching it as his own. I sat on the floor of the garage, staring at the documents. For 2 years, I'd been working in secret, building something that could change the way we think about energy, something that could actually matter. And my brother, my smug, overconfident brother, had stolen it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call him and tell him exactly what I thought. But I didn't, because something else was in the envelope. A note, handwritten. He doesn't know what he has, but I do. Come to the engagement party. We need to talk. J. P. Jonathan Pierce. He knew. He knew Ethan had stolen my work, and for some reason, he wanted to meet me. I stared at the note for a long time, then I booked a flight to San Francisco, back at the party. 8:03 p.m. I was still standing near the back of the ballroom, trying to process what had just happened. Jonathan Pierce knew something. But what? And why did he look at me like that? I scanned the room. Ethan was laughing with a group of his co-workers. My parents were talking to Chloe's family. No one was paying attention to me. Good. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. The note from Jonathan was still there. We need to talk. But he hadn't approached me again. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe he didn't actually know anything. Then someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. Jonathan. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne. He handed me one. You looked like you needed this, he said. I took it. Thanks. He didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, watching the party. Then, quietly, your brother talks about you a lot. My chest tightened. I'm sure he does. He says you're brilliant. In his own way. I laughed bitterly. He just called me a failure in front of 200 people. Jonathan smiled faintly. People say a lot of things they don't mean when they're insecure. I frowned. Ethan's not insecure. He's the golden child. He's always been the golden child. Jonathan took a sip of his champagne. Is that what you think? I didn't answer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out. A small device, about the size of a USB drive, glowing faintly blue. My heart stopped. It was my prototype. You designed this, he said. Not a question. A statement. I stared at it. My throat went dry. I don't know what that is, I whispered. Yes, you do. I looked up at him. His expression was calm, knowing. How did you get that? I asked. Your brother submitted it as part of a pitch 3 weeks ago. He said he'd been working on it for a year. My hands clenched into fists. But the documentation was sloppy, Jonathan continued. The technical specs were inconsistent. The energy output calculations didn't match the design. He held up the device. So I did some digging. Found the original files. They were created on a laptop registered to Madeline Carter. My face burned. I also found receipts for components, lab equipment, all purchased by you. He tilted his head. Your brother didn't design this. You did. The room felt like it was spinning. A few guests nearby turned to look. They'd heard him. My mother was staring. My father's mouth was open. Ethan, across the room, had gone pale. Jonathan smiled. So, I'll ask you again, Madeline. You designed this? I opened my mouth. But before I could answer, Ethan shoved his way through the crowd. Jonathan, wait. No, Jonathan said sharply. I'm done waiting. He turned back to me. Did you design this? Everyone was watching. I swallowed hard, and then I nodded. Yes, I whispered. I did. The room erupted. Ethan's face went from pale to red in seconds. That's not she's lying, he stammered, looking at Jonathan. She's trying to… Stop, Jonathan said, voice cold. The string quartet had stopped playing. 200 guests stood in complete silence, watching. Jonathan held up the device. 3 weeks ago, you pitched this to me as your own invention. You said you'd been developing it for over a year. You brought documentation, projections, market analysis. Ethan's jaw tightened. I did develop it. The files were created on Madeline's laptop, Jonathan interrupted. The components were purchased with her credit card. The lab work was done in a garage she rents in Austin. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother grabbed my father's arm. Richard, did you know about this? My father looked like he'd been struck. I know. I had no idea. Jonathan stepped closer to Ethan. You submitted her work as your own. You lied to me. You lied to my entire company. Ethan's hands were shaking. I helped her. I gave her ideas. You stole from your own sister, Jonathan said flatly. The room exploded into whispers. Someone said, "Oh my God." Someone else said, "I can't believe this." Chloe appeared at Ethan's side, eyes wide. Ethan, what is he talking about? Ethan didn't answer. He was staring at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance. Fear. Maddie, he said quietly. I can explain. I didn't say anything, because what could I possibly say? For years, I'd been the family failure. The one who couldn't finish college, the one who worked dead-end jobs, the one who embarrassed them at every family gathering. And Ethan? Ethan was perfect. Ethan had the career, the salary, the Tesla, the engagement to the perfect woman. But it was all built on a lie. Built on my work, my ideas, my years of late nights and failed experiments and self-taught engineering. He'd stolen it. And he'd introduced me as a failure while standing on the foundation of everything I'd built. My mother stepped forward. Madeline, is this true? I looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't asking because she cared. She was asking because she was embarrassed. Yes, I said quietly. It's true. My father ran a hand through his hair. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked, I said. The words hung in the air. Jonathan turned to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption, but I want to make something very clear. He held up the device again. This technology has the potential to revolutionize renewable energy. It's brilliant, it's innovative, and it was designed by Madeline Carter. He looked directly at me, not her brother. The room erupted again. This time, the whispers were different. Admiration, shock, respect. Ethan looked like he might collapse. Chloe stepped away from him. You told me you invented that. I didn't. You lied to me, she whispered. Jonathan extended his hand toward me. Miss Carter, I'd like to offer you a position at Pierce Biotech, Head of Research and Development. We'll discuss salary and terms tomorrow. My heart stopped. What? I breathed. You're the genius I've been looking for, he said. Not him. Every eye in the room was on me, and for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. I stared at Jonathan's outstretched hand. Head of Research and Development. The words echoed in my head like a dream I was afraid to wake up from. Around me, the ballroom had transformed. The same people who'd laughed when Ethan called me a failure were now staring at me with something else entirely. Curiosity, envy, respect. My mother's face was frozen in shock. My father looked like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. And Ethan? Ethan looked destroyed. Madeline, Jonathan said again, hands still extended. What do you say? I glanced at my brother. He was standing perfectly still, fists clenched at his sides. Chloe had moved several feet away from him, arms crossed, eyes blazing. Someone in the crowd whispered, "She's only 29." Someone else said, "This is insane." I looked back at Jonathan. Can I think about it? His eyebrows raised slightly. Of course, but I'll need an answer by Monday. Monday. 2 days away. I nodded slowly. Okay. He smiled. Good. We'll be in touch. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the center of the ballroom with 200 pairs of eyes still locked on me. My mother was the first to move. She rushed over, grabbing my arm. Madeline, why didn't you tell us you were working on something like this? I pulled my arm free. Would you have cared? Her face flushed. Of course we would have cared. You're our daughter. Am I? I asked quietly. She flinched. My father stepped forward. Maddie, this is incredible. We had no idea you were capable of. Of what? I interrupted. Of succeeding? Of being smart? Of mattering? He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. That's not what I meant. Yes, it was, I said. I looked around the room. At the guests who were still whispering. At Ethan, who looked like he wanted to disappear. At my parents, who suddenly wanted to claim me now that I was worth something. And I realized something. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd spent years trying to make them proud, trying to prove I wasn't a failure, trying to be enough. But I was already enough. I always had been. They just couldn't see it. I took a breath. I'm leaving. My mother's eyes widened. What? No, we need to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I said. I turned toward the exit. Behind me, Ethan's voice cracked. Maddie, wait. I stopped. Didn't turn around. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I almost turned back. Almost let him explain. But then I remembered the smirk on his face. The way he'd called me a failure in front of everyone. The way he'd stolen my work and claimed it as his own. And I kept walking. As I pushed through the ballroom doors, I heard my mother say, Richard, what do we do? I didn't hear his answer, because I was already gone. Outside, the San Francisco air was cold and sharp. I stood on the hotel steps, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You made the right choice. See you Monday, JP. I smiled, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I took an Uber back to my hotel, a cheap place in the Mission District. Nothing like the Fairmont. When I got to my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. 17 missed calls. 12 from my mother, 3 from my father, 2 from Ethan. I didn't listen to any of the voicemails. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for Pierce Biotech. Jonathan's company was bigger than I'd realized. Headquarters in San Francisco. Offices in Tokyo, Berlin, and Boston. Annual revenue in the billions. And he wanted me to lead research and development. Me. The failure. I scrolled through articles about the company. Most were standard business press. But then I found something odd. A blog post from 6 months ago. Written by someone anonymous. The title, Pierce Biotech's Secret Project. What They Don't Want You to Know. I clicked. The post was vague. Conspiracy theory level vague. But it mentioned energy technology, stolen patents, a whistleblower who'd disappeared. My stomach turned. I kept reading. Near the bottom, there was a sentence that made my blood run cold. Sources say Pierce is searching for the original inventor, someone who doesn't know what they've created yet. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. The envelope. The photos. The contract with my name on it. Jonathan hadn't just stumbled across my work. He'd been looking for me. But why? And who sent me that envelope in the first place? A knock on the door startled me. I froze. Maddie, it's me. Ethan. I didn't move. Please, he said through the door. I know you're in there. I just want to talk. I stood slowly and walked to the door. Didn't open it. Go away, I said. I'm sorry, his voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would go this far. I needed something to impress Jonathan. You thought you could steal my work and no one would notice, I said coldly. Silence. I didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered. Yes, you did. Another pause. Are you going to take the job? He asked. I didn't answer. Maddie, please. If you take it, I'm done. He'll fire me. Chloe already left. Mom and Dad won't stop calling. Everything I've built is falling apart. Good, I thought, but I didn't say it. Good night, Ethan, I said. I heard him walk away. I returned to the bed and opened my laptop again. The anonymous blog post was still on my screen. I scrolled to the comments section. Most were deleted, but one remained. Posted 3 weeks ago. She doesn't know what she has, but someone else does, and they're coming for her. My heart pounded. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Across the street, in the shadows of a building, I saw movement. A figure. Watching. I stepped back from the window. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Don't trust anyone, not even him. Check your email. A friend. I opened my email. One new message. No subject line. I clicked. Inside was a single photograph. Jonathan Pierce, standing in a lab. But he wasn't alone. He was standing next to my prototype, and behind him, on a whiteboard, was a list of names. Mine was at the top, crossed out in red. Beneath it, one word. Acquired. My breath caught. I looked back at the window. The figure was gone, but the message was clear. I wasn't being offered a job. I was being collected. And whoever sent me that envelope 3 days ago, they were trying to warn me. So what happens next? Does Madeline take the job, or does she run? And who's really pulling the strings, Jonathan, or someone we haven't met yet? Drop a comment and tell me what you think she should do. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button now, because part 2 is coming and you're going to want to see how deep this goes.